All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday morning, February the 12th, 2025. It's good to be together this morning. We are continuing in our Torah portion. This week, we're going to continue in Exodus 18, the last part of Exodus 18. The title of today's Daily Manna is You Can't Do This Alone. You can't do this alone. And please take a moment if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook to hit like and subscribe. When you hit those likes, it helps. It helps get things out there. And that's what we want to do. We want to make the word of the Lord known and impact a hurting and broken world with the good news of Yeshua, with the hope of the world. And hopefully to do so in a way that with increasing clarity really does convey the heart of God. Such a world that is ready to shut out anything that has to do with the Lord because they've been turned off by the twistedness in religion, and so we want to make sure that we are in ever increasing measure making the Lord known with clarity in a way that really reflects his character. All right. Well, if you haven't downloaded the app on your Apple device, you can do that. Go to our app, go to the App Store and type in Shalom AZ and do that. All right. Well, let's begin. Exodus 18, beginning in verse 1. And let's see. Did you say we're lagging? The camera's lagging. Okay, as long as the stream's not. All right, Exodus 18, beginning verse 1. It says, Now Yitro, the priest of Midian and Moses, his father-in-law, heard about everything God had done for Moses. We read this yesterday. And for his people Israel, and how Adonai had brought Israel out of Egypt. Verse 2. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken in Moses' wife Zipporah after he had sent her away with her 2 sons. And so he had brought her back to him with the boys, and they go in the tent, and Moses tells about everything that has happened. He gives his testimony, and Jethro responds, verse 10, Blessed be Adonai, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Adonai is greater than all gods, since they had acted arrogantly against them. Verse 12, Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, presented a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. Aaron also came along with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. So we're going to come to verse 13 now, and really what we see here is the instituting of what becomes the judicial system, the layout for Israel. There's a lot of, in terms of leadership principles, that can be drawn from this text. Leadership principles that I have yet to fully. These are areas I honestly continually struggle with in the Lord. There are times where, many times, where the very message that I'm having to process and teach, all the time, it's dealing with me first. And today would certainly be a prime example. Verse 13, next day. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people. And they stood around Moses from morning until evening. So he gets up the next day, and he's got a lot to do. In the ancient Near East, as well as in many parts of the world today, the job of leadership involves making decisions. You know, the word judgment is using your judgment, making a decision, using good judgment about disputes. That's part of leadership. And so to be a leader of a people was to be a judicial leader. You had to render decisions in cases of controversy. And so Moses, presumably, we get the sense here, I mean, it seems like this is something that's been happening, whether it was happening every day. I don't think it was necessarily happening every day, but it was happening enough. He'd been judging, making decisions concerning the people on a regular basis. And there probably were complicated cases that were brought before him. And so here comes a day when he sits down to do this, and he's there from the beginning to the end of the day, from morning till night. And if he's giving all of his time and energy to this, there's not much else that he's going to be able to do. This has consumed his entire day. On days where he's judging like this is going to consume his day. So, verse 14, when Moses, his father-in-law, saw all that he did for the people, he said, "What is this? What is this thing," he says, "that you're doing for the people or to the people?" But he says, "What is this thing which you are doing to the people? What's going on here?" He says, "Madua, why are you by yourself all alone?" He says, Why are you sitting alone, separate, all to yourself, with all the people standing around from morning till evening?" Jethro, his father-in-law, sees this. Now, as a Midianite priest, who knows in terms of, what level of leadership. I mean, obviously there's wisdom we're going to see wisdom in the advice that he's going to give. As a Midianite leader, undoubtedly he would have probably been involved in regularly judging among the Midianites. And nothing was wrong with Moses serving as a judge. He doesn't have a problem with that. Again, that's part of making decisions. It's is one of the obligations of leadership. What was wrong, the problem was, there's we know there's 600,000 men that went out of Egypt, and they're, that doesn't count women and children, and he's the only judge. He's the only judge. So, and whether it's a big deal that he's dealing with or it's a small, dispute, he's the only judge. He's the only one making decisions. Everything is coming to him. And, someone can look and say, well, Moses is acting foolishly, or Moses is acting arrogantly. He's being overconfident. I don't know that. I don't think so. I think on one level, remember, we're in Exodus 18. Exodus 20, Moses is going to be on Mount Sinai. We're going to get clarity with instructions carved in stone, written by the finger of God in stone. And so right now, though, Moses is serving as the one who brings forth the word of the Lord. Right? The deal with him and Pharaoh, the deal has been that God would speak to him, and then he would tell Aaron what to say. But the Lord has been speaking to him. And so that's probably the main reason Moses is going it alone, right? Because he's functioning as a prophet who is giving the word of the Lord, and so that's the reason he gives in the next verse. He said, "Why are you doing this? This isn't good." And Moses answered his father-in-law, "Well, because." He says, "Because they come to me, the people come to me." Moses answered his father-in-law, "It's because the people come to me to inquire of God, to darash, midrosh, Elohim." He says they're here to seek after, to know what God would want in this circumstance. He continues, verse 16, when they have an issue, when there's a thing, a word, he says, they come to me. It comes to me, and I judge. I make a decision. The word Hebrew word for judge is shafat. I make a decision. I govern. I judge between a man and his neighbor. And verse 16 continues. And so I cause them to know. Uses the word yada, to know. I cause them to know, or I make them understand God's statutes and his laws, or his instructions. So this is not simply Moses, just spitballing and making decisions on his own. They bring something to me, and I judge between a man and his neighbor. And I want to say, and I cause them to know, here's what God says. Right? Here are God statutes. The word kuch has to do with like boundary markers, the limits. These are the limit. This is within the parameters of what the Lord has said. And then it says, and his Torah Tav, his law, his instructions. Moses is not merely a judge; he's a prophet who's conveying what God desires. In the NIV, it says the people come to me to seek God's will, and it almost makes it sound like Moses already just knows God's will. That's not the case. TLV is more accurate here, where it says the people come to me to inquire of God. Right? Moses is an intermediary. Through him, the people ask God for answers to their disputes, and Moses says, I'm not really judging on my own. I'm deciding between them and inform them this is what the Lord has said. Right? What does God say? And someone would say, well, yeah, but what's the deal? Like, don't God's decrees and his instructions only come later in chapter 20? Now, remember where they're at here. They're at the mountain of God. They're at the base of the mountain of God. They're at Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb. And yet it's not as though God is not speaking. It's not as though God is not speaking to Moses and giving him instructions and giving him his decrees and his laws. He is. And so those things will be written soon. But up to this point, they're not. So, someone's how did the workload get to be so heavy so quickly? Well, again, it's a lot of people. There's the people were newly freed, as they had been slaves under Egyptian oppression. So they had very few legal rights. And so now there are probably a lot of pent-up issues, complaints to settle that needed to be dealt with. There's just the size of the group, and Moses wants to be faithful, to be a good shepherd, and to be faithful to the Lord. So he's doing this, and verse 17 says, but Moses, his father-in-law, said to him, it's not good. Lo tov, he says, it's not good, the thing that you're doing. I know you think you're being a hero. And maybe you don't think you're being a hero. This is not good. It says, verse 18, you will surely fade away. The word here, he says, navol tivol, which is, the word navol is to wither, fade, decay. So it's like fading away, you're going to fade. And so the translation here, you will surely wear yourself out. You're going to languish. You're going to exhaust yourself. And not just you. You have people standing in line all day. They're exhausted. This whole thing is untenable. You're going to wear yourself out, as well as these people who are with you, both you and the people that are with you. It says, because the task is too heavy. It uses that word kavod. It's too weighty. It's too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone by yourself. And he says, He says, lo tochol, which is you don't have the capacity. You don't have the strength, the capability of doing this alone and by yourself. Right? So, don't you tell me what I can't do, fathers-in-law. Yeah. He's come. What is the father-in-law is coming with a heart of love here. Hey, kid, old kid, you can't do this by yourself. What you're doing is not good. There's only so much of you. You're going to fade away. You're going to wear yourself out. You're going to wear out these people. You obey the Lord. Like he was the one, he's been the leader. And in one sense, he's this, you talk about having a Messiah complex. He was the one that is the one bringing salvation to bring the slaves out of Egypt. He, by the hand of the Lord, God has used him. But you cannot do this by yourself. And Moses is not very good at delegating. I'm terrible at it. I struggle. I don't know about you. I struggle to hand out things because I'm like, well, it can be a sense of, well, I know how to do it better, or I don't know. I just, or I don't want to, I feel like I should do this, and not handing things out. Moses is not good at delegating, and his father-in-law says, you can't. Who do you think you are? You don't have, I don't know what Superman you think you are. You don't have the capacity to do this alone. Right? Now Moses is, on one sense you can imagine Moses being like, well, I was telling the Lord that about other stuff. Like, I'm not the guy for this. But he's now taking it upon himself. Or it's been given to him to lead this people. And he's now getting instruction. And the interesting thing is, this is coming from a new believer. It's his father-in-law, but it's someone who just said, now I know that Adonai is God. And so you almost have, some people would call this, kind of like worldly wisdom, as it were. He's coming with just practical, structural wisdom that we're going to see here. But you see that there are principles that God has put in place that are in just the ordered structure of things, that the Lord has created with order and with structure. You look at the Genesis creation account and you look at how, how God operates. In day one, God created the heavens and the earth, and then day two, he creates the sea and the skies, and day three, he creates the land. And so then day four, he fills with day one with the sun and the moon and the stars. Day five, he fills the sea and the air with birds and with fish. And day six, he creates the land and day six fills up what's in day three. Anyway, so you see there's structure, there's order, and so Jethro is coming from a place of wisdom, and so he comes and he says, "Now listen to my voice." Verse 19, Shema. Now hear, listen to me and do what I say. Hear. I'll give you the counsel. I'll give you advice. He says this. Now, here's what I'm intending to do now. I'm going to give you, when it's the same word when we see that Yeshua is that in Isaiah chapter 9, he will be, the child who is born will be wonderful counselor, that advisor. That's what he said. I'm going to give you this advice and counsel. That's what I'm doing now. And it says, and may God be with you. Or it may be, and it says, and he will be with you, and God will be with you. He will be. You represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, right? So you're going to bring their cases to the Lord. God's going to be right in the center of this. In verse 20, he says, enlighten them. This is an interesting word. The word zahar, and it has to do with, it's giving a warning, but a warning with clarity. Do it in a way that is clear and shines out. So you're giving the warnings, the instructions, but you're doing it with clarity. So your job is to enlighten them. You represent the people before God, and you enlighten them as to the statutes and the laws. Your job will be to teach the people, and he says, and show them the way by which they must walk. Literally, it says, and make known to them, cause them to know, cause them to understand the way of walking, the way and how to walk in it. And this is what we call halakha. How do I walk this? So with clarity, bring forth what God has instructed, his limits, his boundaries, and cause them to know, well, how do I walk this out? And literally it says, and the work they must do is show them the doing of what they're to do. Make known to them how they walk it out and the doing of what they must do. Like there's a very practical, like you're not being removed from this. You're not being removed from leading and teaching the people, but this needs to be done more efficiently. Really what he's coming to. There's a better way to do this. And it still keeps you bringing all of this before the Lord. You're going to need to instruct the people about God's instructions and his statutes. Now, again, the Lord is about to put all of that on stone. Not yet parchment, but it's going to be there. The instructions are going to be there for Moses to have, where it's codified. Because if statutes and laws are to be now applied, well, then the people that are going to be doing these judgments are going to need to understand what they do. And so he says, so this is what you're to do. You enlighten them as to the statutes and laws and cause them to know the way by which they must walk and the work they must do. Verse 21, and you should seek out, and the word used here for seek out is the word for discern. I want you to perceive. You need to open your eyes and look. Behold. Seek out men of valor, it says. Well, and here's the way it says. It says, seek out, I'll read it in the TLV. But you should seek out capable men out of all the people, men who fear God, men of truth, who hate bribery. Appoint them to be rulers over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. So there's a structure that's being put in place here. You can't do this alone. There needs to be an organizational structure here, is what he's. So you need to be discerning. You don't just put anyone in these places. You need to discern from among all the people. And it says, choose Enosh Chayil, men Enoshe Chayil, Yirei Elohim. You're going to seek men of valor who fear God. Number one. By men of valor, it's men of strength, men of capacity, strong men who fear God. And those two things are tied together. Not strong men because they're strong men. But strong men who fear God. And that is one phrase here. It's that's the one thing. In the translation here, it's taken the capable men from all the people, men who fear God. It's kind of split, capable men. But it's you take out from all the people, capable or men of valor, men of capacity who fear the Lord. That's key. And then men of truth who hate bribery, who hate dishonesty. So they need to be strong men who fear God, and men who aren't just men of truth, but they hate dishonesty. And you've got to discern this. So this is your job, Moses, as a leader, is to discern perceive what leaders you're to entrust these responsibilities to. And then you're going to appoint them to be rulers over thousands, hundreds, and fifties. All right, so there's a verse 22. Then time is ticking. Then let them judge the people the whole time. So this is going to be taken out of your hands. There's going to be thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And obviously, the greater leaders, the ones with the more, now Jethro just kind of ate with Aaron and the other elders of Israel after, we saw in verse 12, they spent time together. And so those who have more wisdom, those who have more experience, those who have, who the stronger leaders are going to be over thousands. Then in trust, then you're going to have, hundreds and fifties and tens. And so the small disputes, the going over tens, your small group leaders, your community can lead that, they can deal with these things. You don't have to run every little thing past, but then something gets more complicated. And now you have someone who's over that. And you can see this in governmental structures, right? You can see this, how this is a model for governmental structures, how we have things on city level, county level, state level, national level, things like that. So you have those kinds of this kind of structure in place. And so they're going to be judging all the time. And all the big cases are going to be brought to you, and every small, trifling case, they can judge for themselves. You're going to have to let go of this, he says. So he says, make it easier for yourself. He says, take some of the weight off. Make it light over you. Make it easy off of you as they bear the burden with you. Now, Moses the Lord just illustrated this to him. I think the reason the wisdom of this really jumps out at him, is at the end of chapter 17, you had the battle with the Amalekites. And the outcome of the battle was going to be dependent upon Moses' leadership. Hold up your hands. Problem is he can't do it alone. Problem is his arms get tired. That he has been entrusted to something, and there's a lot on his shoulders. There's a lot that's been entrusted to him. And so he's now had this experience where the strength of others becomes his strength. Where the strength of Aaron and the strength of Joshua holding up his arms becomes his strength and becomes great for the people. And if it's just left to him alone, he cannot do it. And so now his father-in-law is coming in with that same instruction in a different way, that same wisdom. You got to let others bear the burden with you. Verse 23, if you do this thing as God so commands you, and I just want to say I don't think it says as God so commands you, because it says if you do this thing and God and he commands you and God commands you, then you'll be able to keep standing. You'll be capable to endure, to keep standing, and all these people will go to their places in shalom, in peace. So here's, if you'll do this thing, and again, he doesn't, if God commands, and there's the understanding that you need to still follow the commands of the Lord. So he's not presuming, Jethro's not presuming to take the place of God here. He's saying, if you do these things and God commands you, you're going to be able to stand. You're not going to fall over from exhaustion. And there's going to be shalom. There's going to be wholeness. There's going to be peace. Everyone on different levels will have their cases adjudicated, and people will not spend morning to night here in the frustration and the yada yada. And they're going to go to their tents, their homes, their places in peace. And he listened. Shema. Shema. And Moses listened to his father-in-law, did everything he said. Moses chose men of valor, capable men out of all Israel, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They judged the people all the time. The hard cases they brought to Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went on his way to his own land. So as often the case, there'll be one who presents the suggestion for improvement. Now he moves on to other things. Jethro returns to his home, and not really to be heard of again. But the story is now here to be told and retold again, and we see it described again, not with Jethro, but being told again later in Deuteronomy, that this structure laid out. And I love that it's put in here. I love that we know that where this came from. And it came from an outsider. It came from a new Midianite priest, who just acknowledged, hey, the Adonai is the Lord above all. But he keeps God right at the center of everything. And Moses doesn't have to go, all of this was my idea. You don't have to have all the great ideas. We don't have to always worry about perception and getting credit for everything and so forth and so on. There's wisdom. You can't do it alone, and we're not called to do it alone. In Acts chapter 6, there are disputes. In Acts chapter 6, there's disputes between basically anyway, there are disputes, and the apostles say, hey, we can't do this. It's about the giving out of food, and so they say we have to devote ourselves to prayer and the preaching of the word. We have to devote ourselves to what God has called us to do. And so they choose capable men full of the Holy Spirit to serve as deacons. In this case, diaconia means ministers, servants, to serve as servants. They say we can't wait on tables. We have to preach the word. And the waiting on tables isn't being diminished as something that's insignificant or we're too big for that. It's just that they have to walk in their calling. And if they spend all their time doing that, they won't be able to do the thing that God's called them to do. And so all of us have to say, Lord, what do you want me to do? How can I serve? What can I do? And so often in our ministry structures, we have a top-down role where it's all it's all laid upon the leader to do everything, or he or she takes that upon themselves rather than being able to entrust it to others, saying, Lord, give me discernment to who to entrust this to. And you see that now Moses still has the responsibility of giving instructions about the laws of the Lord, about the boundaries of God. He's still teaching the leaders. He's going to continually get revelation from the Lord here. And then these leaders will be able to have a guidebook that they can refer to. The Torah, they're going to have this guidebook they can refer to, a law book, as it were, the Constitution and bylaws for the people of God that they can refer to about how do we do this? What do we do in these cases? They're not going to be just pulling it out of their heads. But for just a minute here, that's not yet in writing. And so I imagine when Moses comes back down the mountain and sees and sees the chaos with the golden calf, I imagine that he's like, I don't know if this was a good idea. You know what I mean? Like this is, I entrusted this to you, Aaron. I entrusted them to you. I've been gone, and this is what happens. But that's we can't hoard responsibility because we're afraid of that. We cannot do it alone. I can't do it alone. I know that. And I'm learning that. You can't do it alone, what God's called you to do. We're to walk in community. We're to walk as a team. We're to all say, Lord, how can I do my part? What can I do to help carry the load? Moses, you're not supposed to carry all this. You cannot do it alone. Let the weight come off of you. Let them all carry. Many hands make light work. That's what I should have titled it today. Many hands make light work. You can't do it alone. All right, well. It's a great lesson for all of us. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Let me just say a quick hello. I'm sorry. I'll say hi. I see Charlene on here, and I see Ron and Amy, and good morning to Jerry and Janet and Cheerful Heart. I'm not sure you're at the moment your name, but hi, Cheerful Heart. I like that name too. And Joshua and Barbara and Steve, and let's see here. And Pastor and Sister Martinez. Hope you guys are doing well. Good morning to Kelly and Melody Woods, and to the Eddies, to Lauren and Mike, and Levi and Valor and Haven and Everett and Felix, and to Elizabeth and Jesse, and to Juliet and Sonia and Margarita. Good morning to you guys as well. All right, and Kathleen, good morning. Kathleen's like, I know that she's watching this going, I told you, Rabbi. You're not supposed to do it all by yourself. All right. Now, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.